For almost all of human history, we weren't alone. Right now, you're the only human species left on Earth. But if you traveled back 40,000 years, you could have met someone who looked almost like you, walked like you, hunted like you, and maybe even spoke to you. They weren't aliens. They weren't apes. They were human. Just not our kind of human. At one point, Earth wasn't home to one human species. It was home to many. Some were taller, some were shorter, some lived in freezing Europe. Others survived on isolated tropical islands. For hundreds of thousands of years, they shared this planet. So, what happened? If humans once lived side by side with other humans, why are we the only ones left? Did we hunt them to extinction? Did they simply fail to adapt? Or is the truth much stranger than that? When most people hear the word human, they imagine Homo sapiens, us. But Homo sapiens were only one branch of a much larger family tree. There were the Neanderthals, who ruled Europe and Western Asia, the mysterious Denisovans, known almost entirely from a handful of bones and the DNA they left behind, the tiny Homo floresiensis, barely over a meter tall, earning them the nickname the Hobbits. There was Homo erectus, a species so successful it survived for nearly 2 million years, longer than Homo sapiens have existed today. And there were others. Some we barely understand. Some we only discovered within the last few decades. For a brief moment in Earth's history, this wasn't a planet of humans. It was a planet of human species. And here's the first surprise. Homo sapiens weren't obviously the strongest. If anything, we looked rather ordinary. Neanderthals, on the other hand, were built like heavyweights. Their bones were thicker, their shoulders were broader, their muscles were larger. They could survive brutal ice age winters that would have pushed most people to their limits. And then there's something even more surprising. Their brains. For years, people imagined Neanderthals as primitive cave dwellers, half animal, half human. But fossil evidence painted a very different picture. Their brains were roughly the same size as ours, sometimes even slightly larger. They crafted sophisticated stone tools. They controlled fire. They hunted enormous Ice Age animals. Evidence suggests they cared for injured members of their groups, sometimes for years. Some archaeological discoveries even suggest they buried their dead. The more scientists uncovered, the less Neanderthals looked like failures. In many ways, they looked remarkably human, which creates an uncomfortable question. If they were so capable, why aren't they still here? Maybe they weren't as intelligent. There's little evidence for that. Maybe they couldn't survive harsh environments. They survived Europe during the Ice Age, something our own ancestors hadn't even attempted for most of their history. Maybe they were simply weaker. Quite the opposite. If strength alone determined survival, Neanderthals may have outperformed us. So, what exactly did Homo sapiens have that they didn't? The answer seems obvious. War. It's easy to imagine two human species competing for the same food, the same land, the same shelter. Eventually, one species wins, the other disappears. It's a simple explanation. Almost too simple. And for a long time, many people believed exactly that somewhere in prehistory, our ancestors wiped out every other human species until only Homo sapiens remained. It makes for a dramatic story, but science rarely follows the simplest story, because hidden inside your own body is evidence that something very different happened. Over the past few decades, scientists began extracting DNA from ancient Neanderthal bones. What they found shocked the scientific world. Modern humans carry Neanderthal DNA. If your ancestors came from Europe or Asia, around 1 to 2% of your DNA likely came from Neanderthals. That may not sound like much, but think about what it means. DNA isn't exchanged through war. It's exchanged through families. Our ancestors didn't only fight Neanderthals. Sometimes they trusted them. Sometimes they loved them. Sometimes they had children together. For thousands of years, the two human species didn't simply compete, they lived alongside one another. The same story appeared again with another mysterious group, the Denisovans. Scientists know surprisingly little about what they look like. For years, all we had was a finger bone, a few teeth, and fragments of a jaw. Yet their DNA revealed something extraordinary. People living today in parts of Asia and Oceania still carry Denisovan DNA. Some populations inherited genes that helped them survive at high altitudes. Others inherited genes that strengthened their immune systems. Even though the Denisovans themselves disappeared, their biology didn't. It lives on, inside millions of people alive today. Suddenly, the story changes. Maybe Homo sapiens didn't completely replace the other humans. Maybe we absorbed part of them. But if that's true, why don't Neanderthals or Denisovans still exist as separate species? The answer isn't one dramatic event. It's thousands of small ones. Imagine two villages. One has 50 people. The other has 50,000. If both lose 10 people, the first village may never recover. The second barely notices. For much of their history, Neanderthals lived in relatively small, scattered groups. Homo sapiens formed larger populations connected across vast distances. That difference changed everything. When food disappeared in one region, people could move. When one group invented a better spear, others could copy it. When someone discovered warmer clothing, the idea spread. Knowledge became something that survived even when individuals didn't. In many ways, our greatest invention wasn't a tool. It was each other. Scientists believe Homo sapiens built larger social networks than any previous human species. Groups traded with distant communities, shared resources, shared ideas, shared discoveries. One brilliant invention no longer stayed inside a single family. It spread across entire continents. That meant every generation started where the last one ended. Neanderthals almost certainly learned too. They made tools, used fire, adapted to changing environments. But smaller populations meant fewer opportunities for new ideas to spread. And when disaster struck, small populations are fragile. Climate changed. Forests became grasslands. Animals migrated. Food became unpredictable. Disease spread more easily through isolated groups. A single harsh winter or a few years of poor hunting could erase generations of survival. Not because Neanderthals were weak, not because they were unintelligent, sometimes because they were simply unlucky. Evolution doesn't always reward the strongest. It rewards the population that can recover, the one that can adapt, share, and keep going after disaster. There was no final battle, no last stand, no dramatic moment when one human species defeated another. Instead, the line between them slowly blurred. Some Neanderthal communities disappeared. Others merged into Homo sapiens. Generation after generation, their identity faded, while tiny pieces of them lived on inside ours. But here's one last question. What if they hadn't disappeared? Imagine walking through a city today and seeing another human species waiting at a bus stop, working in an office, playing sports, going to school. Would they have their own countries, their own languages? Would they have the same rights? Would we even think of ourselves as the only humans? It's a strange thought, because for almost our entire existence, we weren't. So why didn't another human species survive? Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Another human species did survive, just not in the way we expected. The last Neanderthal didn't disappear overnight. A small part of them lives on in millions of people today. The last Denisovan never truly vanished. Their genes still help people survive in some of the harshest places on Earth. Perhaps Homo sapiens didn't become the last humans because we were the smartest or the strongest. Perhaps we became the last because we learned something no other human species mastered quite as well: how to connect, how to share, how to build communities far larger than ourselves. In the end, the greatest survival tool humans ever evolved wasn't sharper weapons or bigger brains. It was the ability to survive together.